Tycoon man shocked by encounter with pregnant ex-wife while dining out. Mr. Chan, your 2 p.m. is waiting in the conference room. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Marcus adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, a habit he'd developed whenever he needed to center himself. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. He turned to his desk, where multiple screens displayed stock prices and company metrics. Each one told a story of success, of ruthless decisions that had earned him the nickname the algorithm among his peers. Not because he was good with numbers, but because he seemed to operate like one, cold, calculating, and always correct. Another quarter, another billion, he muttered to himself, picking up the latest financial report. The numbers were impressive, even by his standards. Yet something felt hollow about it all today. A notification pinged on his phone, a news alert about his latest acquisition. The headline read, Chun Technologies CEO strikes again. Another startup falls under the algorithm's empire. Mr. Chan? His assistant appeared at the door, looking nervous. They're getting restless. Marcus straightened his tie, his face settling into the mask of confidence he'd perfected over years of boardroom battles. Let them be restless. It's good for them to remember who they're dealing with. As he walked toward the conference room, employees scattered like leaves in the wind, their whispered conversations dying at his approach. He could hear their murmurs behind his back. There goes Marcus Chun. Did you hear he worked through Christmas again? I heard he doesn't even sleep. They say he traded his soul for success. The whispers weren't entirely wrong. Marcus had built his empire on the foundation of 70-hour workweeks and missed family dinners. Relationships were variables in his equation for success, variables he'd learned to eliminate. He paused before the conference room door, catching his reflection in the polished surface. For a split second, he saw not the powerful CEO, but the young man who once dreamed of changing the world through technology. That man had disappeared somewhere between his first million and his latest billion. Time to make history, he whispered to himself, pushing open the door to face another room full of people who both feared and admired him. The algorithm was about to begin another calculation, unaware that his perfectly ordered world was about to be thrown into beautiful chaos. I can't do this anymore, Marcus. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. He remembered her standing in their penthouse living room, her green eyes swimming with tears. We're living separate lives under the same roof. The conference room before him blurred as the past overtook his present. Sarah, be reasonable, his past self had said, not even looking up from his laptop. We have everything we could want. The house, the lifestyle, everything except each other. Her voice had cracked. When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time you came to bed before midnight? I want a family, Marcus. I want a husband who's present. Not just a ghost who leaves before dawn and returns after dark. The memory of her throwing her wedding ring onto his desk made his chest tighten. The platinum band had made a small ping as it bounced off his MacBook, a sound that still haunted his dreams. If you walk out that door, he had threatened, finally looking up, don't expect to come back. That's the problem, Marcus. I've been gone for months. You were too busy to notice. Back in the present, Marcus loosened his tie slightly, feeling the same suffocation he'd felt that day. The divorce proceedings had been quick, clinical, just like everything else in his life. He'd let his lawyers handle it, buried himself deeper in work, treated it like another hostile takeover that needed to be managed. Mr. Chan? His assistant's voice snapped him back. Are you all right? You've been standing here for... I'm fine. He cut her off, his voice sharper than intended. But he wasn't fine. For the first time in 8 months, he allowed himself to remember Sarah's final words before she walked out. Someday, Marcus, you'll realize that success isn't measured in quarterly reports. And I hope when that day comes, it won't be too late. He straightened his shoulders, pushing the memory away with practiced efficiency. But as he finally opened the conference room door, Sarah's words lingered like a ghost, whispering of choices made and paths not taken. The room full of executives fell silent as he entered, but for once, the algorithm's mind wasn't on the impending deal. Instead, it was caught in the undertow of what-ifs and might-have-beens. even as he prepared to negotiate another billion-dollar acquisition. Little did he know, fate was about to force him to confront those what-ifs sooner than he expected. "Your usual table, Mr. Chun," the maitre d' announced with practiced deference. "Mr. Harrison and his team are already waiting." The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of New York's elite, the soft clink of fine china, and the subtle notes of a jazz piano. Marcus followed the maitre d' through the maze of tables, each step measured and purposeful. This was his arena, where deals were sealed over perfectly seared wagyu and $100 glasses of wine. "Marcus, there's the man of the hour." James Harrison stood up, his venture capitalist smile as practiced as his handshake. "We were just discussing your latest quarterly numbers. Impressive, as always." The table was positioned perfectly, a corner spot that offered both privacy and a view of the entire restaurant. Marcus had chosen it countless times for its strategic advantages. Tonight, it would prove to be both a blessing and a curse. "Gentlemen," Marcus nodded, taking his seat. "I trust you've had time to review the proposal?" A waiter appeared silently, pouring a 1982 Bordeaux into Marcus's glass. The deep red liquid swirled, catching the light like liquid rubies. "Before we dive in," Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping, "word on the street is that Samsung is interested in your AI division. Care to comment?" Marcus allowed himself a small smile, the kind that revealed nothing while suggesting everything. "James, you know better than to." The words died in his throat. Through the elegant arch of the restaurant's entrance, a figure appeared that made time itself seem to stop. The wine glass froze halfway to his lips, his hand suddenly unsteady. "Marcus." Harrison's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You look like you've seen a ghost." But it wasn't a ghost. It was Sarah. And she was... The crystal stem nearly slipped from his fingers as his brain processed what his eyes were telling him. Sarah, in a flowing emerald dress that matched her eyes, was being led to a table across the restaurant. But it was her silhouette that sent his world spinning, the unmistakable curve of her belly, proud and prominent. Excuse me for a moment," Marcus managed, his voice barely a whisper. "We haven't even started," Harrison protested. 5 minutes, Marcus cut him off, already rising from his chair, his legs moving of their own accord. The restaurant's ambient noise faded to a dull roar in his ears. His heart pounded against his ribs like it was trying to escape. 7 months. It had been 7 months since the divorce was finalized. And Sarah was at least 7 months. The mathematics of the situation hit him like a physical blow, making him grab the back of an empty chair for support. The implications were staggering, the possibilities overwhelming. As he watched her being seated, time seemed to slow down. Sarah hadn't noticed him yet, but any moment now she would look up, and their worlds would collide in a way neither of them had planned. The algorithm, for the first time in years, had no protocol for this situation. "Would Madam like still or sparkling water?" the waiter asked, pulling out her chair. "Still, please," Sarah's voice carried across the restaurant, striking Marcus like a physical blow. It was the same voice that used to wish him good morning, the same voice that had finally broken saying goodbye. Then it happened. Her eyes, scanning the room as she reached for her water glass, met his. The recognition was instant, electric. The glass stopped midway to her lips, mirroring his own frozen state from moments ago. Her face paled, then flushed, emotions playing across her features like shadows at sunset. "Sarah," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him from this distance. Her dining companion, a woman Marcus didn't recognize, noticed her distress. "Sarah? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a..." "Marcus," Sarah breathed, her hand instinctively moving to protect her belly, a gesture that sent a jolt through his entire body. Without conscious thought, Marcus found himself moving toward her table, his legs carrying him through the maze of diners, each step feeling like an eternity. The buzz of conversation dimmed, the clink of silverware faded, and all he could hear was the thundering of his own heart. "Mr. Chun," Harrison's voice called from somewhere behind him. "The deal," Marcus raised a hand, silencing him without turning around. The algorithm was offline. This was pure human instinct now. As he approached her table, Sarah's companion looked between them, realization dawning on her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is him." Sarah's fingers gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "Marcus, how long?" The words escaped his lips before he could stop them. His eyes fixed on her belly. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. A waiter approaching with menus sensed the tension and quietly retreated. In the background, the piano player hit a wrong note, the discord perfectly matching the moment. Sarah's chin lifted slightly, that familiar gesture of defiance he'd both loved and dreaded during their marriage. "I don't think this is the time or place. 7 months." His voice was barely controlled, each word carefully measured despite the chaos in his mind. 8. Her hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "Marcus, please. Not here." But he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The implications of the timing crashed through his mind like a tsunami, destroying every carefully constructed wall he'd built since their divorce. "Is it?" He started, then stopped, unable to form the question that could change everything. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady when she finally spoke. "You should go back to your meeting. Some things are more important than others. Isn't that what you always said?" The words hit him like a slap, but it was the protective way her hands cradled her belly that truly broke him. In that gesture, he saw everything he'd lost, everything he might have had, and possibly everything that might still be his. Behind him, he could feel Harrison and his team watching, could practically hear the gossip starting to circulate through the restaurant. The mighty algorithm, frozen in place by the sight of his pregnant ex-wife. But for the first time in his life, Marcus Chun didn't care about appearances, about deals, about his carefully cultivated image. All he cared about was the answer to a question he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. "Excuse us, Claire," Sarah said softly to her companion, who quickly gathered her things and retreated to the bar, leaving them in their own private hurricane. Marcus pulled out the now empty chair, his movements mechanical. 7 months, he repeated, more to himself than to her. The timing. It would have been the night of the Peterson merger. Sarah finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. The memory hung between them, their last moment of connection before everything fell apart. His hands gripped the chair's backrest, until his knuckles turned white. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah's laugh was bitter, tinged with hurt. "Tell you? When, Marcus? Between your 4 a.m. conference calls with Tokyo? Or maybe during one of the 3 divorce hearings you were too busy to attend? This isn't about our divorce." His voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. He lowered it again, leaning forward. This is your potential heir?" Sarah's green eyes flashed. "Another asset to add to your portfolio." The words stung, but what hurt more was the truth behind them. He had reduced everything in his life to numbers, assets, and liabilities. Even their marriage had become a series of transactions. Time allocated, resources distributed, emotions quantified. "Is it?" He started again, his voice cracking. "Am I?" Sarah's hand moved to her belly again, and this time, Marcus noticed something he'd missed before, a slight movement under her dress, a ripple that made his heart stop. "The baby's kicking," Sarah said softly, almost to herself. Then, looking directly into his eyes for the first time, "Would you like to?" Marcus's hand moved before his brain could process the invitation. Sarah guided it to her belly, and for the first time in his life, the algorithm experienced something that couldn't be calculated, quantified, or controlled. Kick. Strong, defiant, real. "Oh my God," he whispered, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "She's strong," Sarah said, a hint of pride breaking through her guard. "Like her father." "She?" Marcus's voice cracked. "A daughter. His daughter." The word echoed in his mind like a bell tolling the end of his old life. "Mr. Chan?" Harrison's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "The contracts are waiting." Marcus didn't turn around. His hand remained on Sarah's belly, feeling another kick. Another sign of life he'd nearly missed entirely. Tell them the meeting's over, he said, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. But the deal, I said. Marcus's voice took on an edge that made Harrison step back. The meeting is over. For the first time in his career, Marcus Chen, the algorithm, was about to make a decision based not on data, not on profit margins, but on something he'd forgotten how to calculate, his heart. The question was, would it be too late? The Peterson merger, he said softly, his hand still resting on Sarah's belly. I remember every detail. Sarah's breath caught. Marcus, don't. You were wearing that blue dress, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. The one from Milan. You'd waited up for me, even though it was past midnight. The memory washed over them both like a wave. 8 months earlier, we closed it, Marcus had announced, loosening his tie as he walked into their penthouse. $2 billion. The board signed off an hour ago. Sarah had been curled up on their leather sofa, a glass of wine untouched beside her. Congratulations, she'd said, but her voice had held something else, desperation, perhaps. Hope. You didn't have to wait up, he'd said, pouring himself a scotch. I wanted to. I miss you, Marcus. She'd stood then, the blue silk dress catching the city lights from their floor-to-ceiling windows. Do you remember what today is? He'd paused, glass halfway to his lips. Another calculation failed. Our anniversary, she'd whispered. 5 years. The scotch had burned his throat as he'd swallowed hard. Sarah, but she'd crossed the room to him, pressed her finger to his lips. Don't apologize. Just be here. Now, with me. What followed had been different from their usual carefully scheduled intimacy. It had been desperate, passionate, full of unspoken words and suppressed emotions. They'd made love like people drowning, clinging to each other as if they both knew it would be the last time. Back in the present, Sarah's voice pulled him from the memory. I found out 3 weeks later, she said quietly. The day after I moved out. Marcus's hand trembled against her belly. Why didn't you come back? Would it have changed anything? Her eyes met his challenging. Would you have suddenly started coming home for dinner? Stopped taking calls during our conversations? Started putting us before the next big deal? Another kick against his palm made him flinch. Their daughter, making her presence known, demanding attention just like her mother had tried to do for years. I wouldn't have. He started, then stopped, honesty forcing its way through his carefully constructed facades. I don't know what I would have done. That's why I couldn't tell you, Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. I couldn't bear to watch you treat our child like another appointment in your calendar. The truth of her words hit him harder than any failed negotiation ever had. In the reflection of the restaurant's window, he caught a glimpse of himself, the perfect suit, the calculated expression, the man who had traded his soul for success. But now, with his hand on Sarah's belly, feeling the life they'd created in that last desperate attempt to save their marriage, Marcus Chin finally understood what he'd been calculating wrong all along. Sarah, he said, his voice barely a whisper, I need to tell you something. The sudden flash of cameras through the restaurant's windows cut him off. Somehow, word had gotten out. The press had arrived, eager to capture the moment the algorithm's perfect world began to crack. Sarah's face paled. I should go. No, Marcus said firmly, surprising them both. No more running. Not from this. Not from her. His hand pressed gently against her belly. Not from us. The question was, could the algorithm rewrite his most fundamental programming? And more importantly, would Sarah give him the chance to try? Mr. Chan, his assistant appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, tablet in hand. Your PR team is already receiving calls. They need a statement. And Mr. Harrison, not now, Marcus cut her off his, I still locked with Sarah's. But sir, the stock price could. I said not now. His voice carried across the restaurant, causing several diners to turn their heads. The assistant retreated, leaving Marcus torn between two worlds, the empire he'd built and the family he'd lost. Sarah started to rise, one hand supporting her belly. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world, your image, your reputation. Damn the reputation, Marcus said, surprising himself with the intensity of his words. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Come with me. Marcus, please." The word felt foreign on his tongue. The algorithm didn't say please. The algorithm demanded, commanded, directed. But Marcus Chun, the man beneath the persona, was learning to speak a new language. Sarah hesitated, then took his hand. The touch sent electricity through him, memories of their life together flooding back. He led her through the kitchen, past startled staff members, to a private exit he'd used countless times for discreet business meetings. His town car was waiting, driver already opening the door. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her voice uncertain. "Somewhere we can talk." "Really talk?" He helped her into the car, then slid in beside her. Without the world watching, as the car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the chaos of reporters and flashing cameras, Marcus felt the weight of his phone in his pocket. It was buzzing incessantly, likely his board members, PR team, and Harrison all demanding answers. For the first time in his career, he turned it off. Sarah noticed the gesture, her eyes widening slightly. The great Marcus Chun, disconnecting? "Some calculations require complete focus," he said softly, his hand finding hers in the darkness of the car. The city lights streaked past the windows as they drove, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that matched the turmoil in Marcus's mind. His internal algorithm was running countless scenarios, but none of them followed his usual profit and loss matrix. Instead, he was calculating the cost of lost time, of missed moments, of a life measured in quarterly reports rather than quarterly scans of his growing daughter. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, breaking the silence. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I've become." Sarah turned to look at him, her profile illuminated by passing streetlights. "That's the most honest thing you've said to me in years." Their daughter kicked again, as if punctuating the moment. Sarah instinctively guided his hand back to her belly, and in that touch, Marcus felt something his algorithms had never accounted for: hope. "But I want to learn," he whispered, feeling another kick against his palm. "If you'll let me." The car continued through the night-lit streets of Manhattan, carrying them toward an uncertain future. The algorithm was facing its greatest challenge yet, learning to compute the incalculable value of love and family. As they approached their destination, Marcus realized that for the first time in his life, he was about to enter a negotiation where winning meant something entirely different than what he'd always thought it did. "Marcus, why are we—" "I never sold it," he admitted quietly. "Never changed a thing inside." The doorman's eyes widened as he recognized them both. "Mrs. Chun. I mean, Ms. Bennett, Mr. Chun." Marcus guided Sarah through the marble lobby, his hand hovering protectively near her lower back. The elevator ride to the penthouse was thick with unspoken words and memories. As the doors opened directly into their former home, Sarah gasped softly. Everything was exactly as she'd left it 8 months ago. Even the framed photo of their wedding day still stood on the console table. "You really didn't change anything," she whispered, running her fingers along the familiar surfaces. "I couldn't," Marcus admitted, watching her move through the space. "Every time the decorators came, He stopped, embarrassed by the emotion threatening to break through his carefully maintained facade. Sarah paused by the windows, the same ones where they'd shared their last intimate moment. The city sparkled below, a testament to all he'd achieved, yet suddenly it all seemed hollow. "I made a scene," he said, loosening his tie, "at the restaurant. It'll be all over the media by morning." Sarah turned to face him, one hand resting on her belly. "The great algorithm losing control? I'm sure your PR team is having a meltdown." "Let them," he said, surprising them both. "I've spent 15 years building an empire based on control, on perfect calculations, on never showing weakness." He moved closer to her, close enough to catch the familiar scent of her perfume. "But I never calculated the cost." "And what was the cost, Marcus?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Everything that mattered." His hand reached out, hesitating just inches from her face. "You, our family, our future." A tear slid down Sarah's cheek. "You can't just throw around words like family and future now. Not after." "I know," he cut her off gently. "I know I have no right to ask for anything. But that little girl, his voice cracked. Our daughter. She deserves better than the man I've been. Sarah's breath hitched as the baby kicked again. And what makes you think you can change? The Marcus Chun I knew couldn't even change his dinner plans for our anniversary. The words stung, but he deserved them. Because for the first time in my life, I'm terrified, he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. Not of losing a deal or missing projections, but of missing her first smile, her first steps, her first words. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, still turned off, and placed it on the nearby table. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, watching as he removed his Patek Philippe watch and placed it beside the phone. "Recalculating," he said simply. "For the first time in my life, I don't want to be the algorithm. I just want to be her father." His voice broke on the last word. "If you'll let me." Sarah's hands trembled as she wiped away her tears. "Marcus, The sudden sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. They both turned to see his phone vibrating so violently it had knocked over a crystal vase. Reality was demanding its due. "You should answer it," Sarah said quietly. "Your empire needs its emperor." Marcus looked at the phone, then back at Sarah and their unborn daughter. In that moment, the algorithm faced its most critical calculation yet: the value of an empire versus the worth of a family. His next move would change everything. "Do you remember?" he said softly, still looking at the broken glass. "The night you tried to tell me about wanting to start a family?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved to protect her belly. "Which time?" "There were so many attempts." The memory crystallized, sharp and painful. "1 year earlier, Marcus, please, just look at me for 1 minute," Sarah had pleaded, standing in his home office at 11 p.m. "Put down the laptop." "Sarah, I'm in the middle of the Asian market opening. Can't this wait?" "It's always waiting, Marcus. Our whole life is waiting." She'd moved to close his laptop, forcing him to look at her. "I turned 34 last week. You missed my birthday dinner. By the way, I sent flowers." "I don't want flowers." Her voice had cracked. "I want a baby. I want a family. I want my husband to be present in our life." He'd pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaustion and irritation warring in his voice. "We've discussed this. The timing isn't right. The company is always at a crucial point." She'd swept his papers off the desk in frustration, something she'd never done before. "When will it be enough, Marcus? When will we be stable enough? Successful enough? Rich enough?" "You're being irrational." "No, I'm being human. Something you've forgotten how to be." Back in the present, Marcus turned to Sarah, his voice thick with regret. "You were right. About everything. It doesn't matter now," she said quietly, but her hand trembled as she brushed away a tear. "It matters more than ever." He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "I was so focused on building something to give to our future children, I forgot to build a life that would actually include them." The phone buzzed again, more urgently this time. Sarah glanced at it. "Your board won't wait forever. Let them wait." His voice was firm. "I've made them my priority for 15 years. Tonight, I need to tell you something I should have said that night." He took a deep breath. "I was scared." Sarah's eyes widened. "You? The algorithm? Scared? Terrified," he admitted. "My own father, he was never there. Always working, building his empire. I swore I'd be different. I'd build something so successful that my children would never want for anything." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Instead, I became exactly like him." "Marcus." Sarah's voice softened. "I thought if I could just reach the next level, close the next deal, acquire the next company, then I could finally slow down. Be present. Be the husband and father I wanted to be." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time in years. But there was always another level, another deal, another acquisition. The baby kicked again, making Sarah gasp softly. Without thinking, Marcus reached out, placing his hand on her belly. This time she didn't pull away. "I feel her," he whispered, or replacing the usual calculation in his voice. "She's so strong. She kicks more when she hears voices, Sarah said softly, especially male voices, as if she's been waiting to hear her father. The word father hit Marcus like a physical blow. In that moment, looking at Sarah's tear-stained face and feeling their daughter move beneath his palm, the algorithm finally computed the true cost of success and found it bankrupting. "I want to be there," he said, his voice raw with emotion, "for every kick, every heartbeat, every moment. Not just as a provider, but as a father. As your—" he hesitated, then pushed forward. "As your husband, if you'll give me another chance." The phone's buzzing finally stopped, leaving them in silence broken only by their breathing and the faint sounds of the city below. The next few moments would determine whether the algorithm's greatest miscalculation could become his most important revelation. "Marcus," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I want to believe you, but I've made promises before." He finished for her, the weight of his past failures heavy in his voice. She nodded, then slowly moved away from him, walking towards the large windows overlooking the city. Her reflection, belly prominent, overlaid the glittering skyline, a visual metaphor for the choice before them. "Do you remember our honeymoon?" she asked suddenly, her back still to him. Marcus felt a pang of guilt. Bora Bora. "We had to cut it short because of the Yoshida merger," Sarah finished, turning to face him. "3 days into our 2-week honeymoon, you were on a plane back to New York." The memory stung, but Marcus forced himself to stay present, to really listen for perhaps the first time in their relationship. "I told myself it was just the beginning," Sarah continued, her hand absently stroking her belly, "that once you achieved your goals, you'd slow down. We'd have time for vacations, for dinners without your phone buzzing every 5 minutes. For a family." Marcus took a tentative step towards her. "Sarah, She held up a hand, stopping him. "Let me finish, please." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Year after year, I watched you climb higher, achieve more. And with each success, you seemed to drift further away." Her voice cracked. "The man I fell in love with, the one who used to surprise me with picnics in the park and dance with me in, stepped back." "I love you," he said, the words carrying the weight of years of unspoken emotion. "Both of you. Whatever happens next, never doubt that." As he moved towards the door, Sarah called out, her voice trembling, "Marcus." He turned, his hand on the doorknob. "We'll be waiting," she said, her hands cradling her belly. "However long it takes. We'll be here." Marcus nodded, a single tear escaping down his cheek. Then, squaring his shoulders, he opened the door to face the consequences of his past and the uncertain promise of his future. The algorithm was about to face its greatest recalculation yet, one where success would be measured not in dollars and cents, but in the love of a family and the redemption of a soul. Hours ticked by as Marcus answered question after question, laying bare the intricate web of financial maneuvers that had built his fortune. With each confession, he felt a strange mix of dread and relief, the weight of his sins lifting even as the consequences loomed larger. Finally, as dawn broke over the city, the door opened again. A tired-looking FBI agent entered, holding a file. "Mr. Chun," she said, her voice neutral, "we've verified your statements. Your cooperation has been unprecedented." Marcus nodded, his throat dry. "What happens now?" The agent sighed, taking a seat across from him. "Honestly, it's complicated. The scope of what you've revealed. It's going to take months, maybe years to unravel fully." A knock at the door interrupted them. Another agent entered, whispering something to his colleague. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Mr. Chun," she said, turning back to Marcus, "there's someone here to see you. Normally, we wouldn't allow this, but..." Given the circumstances, the door opened wider, and Sarah waddled in, her face pale but determined. "Sarah." Marcus stood abruptly, his handcuffs jangling. "What are you doing here? You should be resting. The baby is fine." She cut him off, moving closer. "But her father..." "I needed to see you." The FBI agents exchanged glances, then quietly left the room, giving them a moment of privacy. Sarah reached out, her fingers gently tracing the dark circles under Marcus's eyes. "You look terrible," she said softly. A tired chuckle escaped him. "Not my best look, I admit. I've been thinking," Sarah said, her hand moving to cradle her belly. "About what you said last night. About facing consequences and becoming the man we deserve." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "I want you to know," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "that I'm proud of you. The old Marcus, the algorithm, would have fought this with every lawyer and loophole he could find. But you're choosing to make things right no matter the cost. Sarah, she pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. "Let me finish. I've spent the last 8 months trying to imagine our life without you. Trying to convince myself that our daughter would be better off without the chaos that always seemed to follow in your wake." Marcus felt his heart constrict, fearing what might come next. "But now," Sarah continued, tears welling in her eyes, "I can't imagine our life without the man I saw last night. The one who finally put us first. The one who's willing to lose everything to gain what really matters." She took his cuffed hands in hers, placing them on her belly. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if recognizing her father's touch. "Whatever happens next," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "we face it together. As a family." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, unable to hold them back any longer. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Maybe not," Sarah replied with a small smile. "But our daughter deserves her father. And I deserve the man I fell in love with. The one who's finally found his way back to us." The door opened again, the FBI agent clearing her throat softly. "I'm sorry, but we need to continue the questioning." Sarah nodded, then turned back to Marcus. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn book. "I found this in your office last night," she said, placing it in his hands. "I thought you might need it." Marcus looked down, recognition dawning in his eyes. It was a copy of The Little Prince, the book he'd read to Sarah's belly every night during the early months of their marriage, when the dream of a family had still seemed possible. "Read to her," Sarah said softly, squeezing his hands. "Every night. Let her know her father's voice, even from in here. We'll be waiting for you however long it takes." As Sarah was led out of the room, Marcus clutched the book to his chest. For the first time in years, he felt truly rich, not in money or power, but in the promise of love and redemption. The algorithm had finally computed the most important equation of all: the value of family over fortune, of love over legacy. As he opened the worn pages of The Little Prince, Marcus began to read aloud, his voice carrying the hope of a new beginning for himself, for Sarah, and for the daughter who would know him not as the algorithm, but simply as Dad. Every evening, at precisely 8 p.m., a guard would appear with a phone. "Your daily call, Chun," he'd say almost gently. Marcus's hands would tremble slightly as he took the device, anticipation building. The phone would ring once, twice. "Marcus," Sarah's voice, slightly breathless, would come through. "I'm here," he'd respond, his throat tight with emotion. "How are you both doing?" "We're good. She's been kicking up a storm today. I think she misses her bedtime story." A small chuckle would escape him, tinged with both joy and sadness. "Well, we can't have that, can we? Is she ready?" He'd hear Sarah's soft grunt as she adjusted herself, likely settling into the armchair they'd picked out together in what felt like a lifetime ago. "We're ready, Daddy. Go ahead." Marcus would close his eyes, picturing them, Sarah, her belly round and full, their daughter nestled safely inside. He'd open The Little Prince to where they'd left off the night before and begin to read. The little prince sat down on a stone and raised his eyes toward the sky. As he read, pouring every ounce of love and hope into the words, he could almost feel the baby responding, her kicks punctuating the story as if she were trying to reach through the phone to touch him. Tonight, however, as he neared the end of the chapter, Sarah's sharp intake of breath interrupted him. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Panic edged his voice. "Nothing's wrong," she said, but her voice was strained. "It's just, I think she's coming, Marcus." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Now? But it's too early. We still have 3 weeks. Tell that to your daughter, Sarah said with a pained laugh. She seems to have inherited your impatience. Marcus pressed himself against the bars of his cell, as if he could somehow will himself through them. What do you need me to do? Should I call someone? Your sister? The doctor? It's okay, Sarah assured him, though he could hear the fear beneath her calm exterior. I've already called the doctor. Claire is on her way to drive me to the hospital. Marcus felt utterly helpless, trapped behind bars while the most important moment of his life unfolded beyond his reach. Sarah, I should be there. I promised I'd be there for every moment. There was a pause, filled only by Sarah's measured breathing, clearly working through a contraction. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but determined. You are here, Marcus. Every word you've read, every night you've spent talking to her. You've been here, and you'll continue to be here, even if you can't physically be in the delivery room. Tears streamed down Marcus's face, unchecked. I love you, he whispered. Both of you. So much. We love you too, Sarah replied, her voice breaking slightly. Now, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Finish the chapter. Let the last thing she hears in the womb be her father's voice reading her favorite story. Marcus nodded, though Sarah couldn't see him. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and began to read again. His voice, usually so controlled and measured, now trembled with emotion as he recited the final lines. You know, my flower, I'm responsible for her, and she's so weak and so naive. She has 4 ridiculous thorns to defend herself against the world. As he closed the book, he heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath, followed by the rustle of movement. I have to go, she said quickly. Claire's here. I'll have someone call you when there's news. Sarah, wait, Marcus called out, desperate to hold onto the connection for just a moment longer. What should I? But the line had already gone dead. Marcus sank to the floor of his cell, the book clutched to his chest. For the first time since his arrest, he felt the full weight of his confinement crushing down on him. The algorithm had no equation for this, the agonizing weight, the fear, the desperate hope. As the night deepened, Marcus did something he hadn't done since he was a child. He prayed, not for his freedom or for leniency in his upcoming trial, but for Sarah and their daughter, for a safe delivery, for a chance to be the father he now knew he was meant to be. Outside his cell, the world continued to turn. But for Marcus Chen, time stood still, measured only by the frantic beating of his heart and the deepening silence of the phone that refused to ring. Chun, the guard finally said, breaking the tense silence. You're going to wear a hole in the floor. Marcus stopped abruptly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I should be there, he muttered, more to himself than to the guard. I should be holding her hand, telling her it's going to be okay. The guard sighed, then made a decision that went against protocol. Look, I shouldn't do this, but... He pulled out his personal cell phone. Call your wife, sister. Just make it quick. Okay? Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief. He took the offered phone with trembling hands, quickly dialing Claire's number. It rang once, twice. Hello? Claire's voice was hushed, as if she were trying not to disturb someone. Claire, it's Marcus. How is she? The baby? Is everything? Marcus? Claire sounded surprised. How are you even calling? Never mind. Listen. But before she could continue, Marcus heard a sound in the background that made his heart stop. A tiny, mewling cry, followed by Sarah's exhausted but joyful voice. Is that him? Let me talk to him. There was a rustling sound as the phone changed hands, and then Sarah's voice filled his ear. Marcus? Are you there? I'm here, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. Sarah? Is that... Did I just hear? Yes, Sarah said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Marcus, she's here. Our daughter is here, and she's perfect. A sob escaped him, a mix of joy and anguish at not being able to see them. Tell me everything, please. Sarah's voice was tired but radiant as she described their daughter. She has your eyes, Marcus, and your chin. She's got a full head of dark hair, and the tiniest, most perfect fingers you've ever seen. She's small, 5 pounds, 6 ounces, but the doctors say she's healthy. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to picture the scene. What's her name? He asked softly. There was a pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I was thinking, what about Lily? After the flower in The Little Prince. Lily, Marcus repeated, tasting the name. Lily Chen is beautiful, perfect. Just then, Lily let out another small cry. Oh, someone's hungry, Sarah cooed. Marcus, I have to go, but I promise we'll bring her to see you as soon as we can. I love you. I love you too, Marcus said quickly. Both of you. So much. As the call ended, Marcus handed the phone back to the guard, murmuring an unwavering commitment to the family he almost lost. Today was different. Marcus sat in the visitation room, his heart pounding with anticipation. It was his parole hearing day, and everything hung in the balance. The door opened, and Sarah walked in, holding Lily's hand. At 3 years old, Lily was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, her dark curls bouncing as she ran towards Marcus. Daddy! She squealed, launching herself into his arms. Marcus scooped her up, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her small body against his chest. Hello, my little prince, he whispered, using the nickname inspired by their nightly story. Sarah approached more slowly, her face a mix of hope and anxiety. How are you feeling? She asked, reaching out to squeeze his hand. Nervous, Marcus admitted, shifting Lily to his hip. But ready. Whatever happens today, I want you both to know that these past 3 years have changed me in ways I never thought possible. Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. We've seen it, Marcus. In every letter, every call, every visit. You're not the same man who went in here. Lily, oblivious to the tension, began chattering excitedly. Daddy, I drawed you a picture for good luck. Mommy says you might come home soon. Will you read me stories every night? In person? Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. A guard appeared at the door. Chun, it's time. Marcus hugged Lily tightly, then set her down. He turned to Sarah, cupping her face gently. Whatever happens in there, know that you and Lily are my world now. My only algorithm is loving you both. Sarah leaned into his touch, tears spilling down her cheeks. We'll be right here, waiting. As Marcus followed the guard out, he heard Lily's small voice call out, Good luck, Daddy. I love you to the moon and back. The parole hearing room was austere, intimidating. Marcus sat before the board, acutely aware of how much rode on the next few minutes. He'd spent the past 3 years not just serving his time, but actively working to make amends. He'd developed financial literacy programs for inmates, volunteered in the prison library, even started a mentoring program for at-risk youth. The board members looked at him with impassive faces as they reviewed his file. Mr. Chun, the lead board member began, your case is unique. You've shown remarkable rehabilitation, and your voluntary cooperation has been instrumental in dismantling several major financial fraud operations. Marcus nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I've tried to use my time here to give back, to make amends for the harm I've caused. Another board member leaned forward. And what about after your release? How can we be sure you won't return to your old ways? Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of Sarah and Lily waiting just outside. Because I found something more valuable than any fortune I could ever amass. My family, my daughter. I went into prison as the algorithm focused only on numbers and success. But I'm leaving as a father, a husband, a man who understands that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. The room fell silent as the board members exchanged glances. The lead member cleared her throat. Mr. Chun, we've reviewed your case carefully. Given your exemplary behavior, your contributions while incarcerated, and the recommendations from the staff here, we've come to a decision. Marcus held his breath, his entire future hanging on the next words. We are granting your parole, effective immediately. The words hit Marcus like a physical force. He blinked, barely able to comprehend what he'd heard. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." As he was led out of the room, his mind raced. He was going home, to Sarah, to Lily, to the life he'd been dreaming of for 3 long years. The guard led him to a processing room, where he was given back the suit he'd worn on the day of his arrest. As he changed, shedding the prison uniform for the last time, Marcus felt like he was shedding his old self along with it. Finally, he stood before the main gates. They buzzed open, and there, just beyond, stood Sarah and Lily, his family, his future. As he stepped into the sunlight, Lily broke free from Sarah's hand, running towards him at full speed. "Daddy! Daddy!" Marcus knelt down, opening his arms wide. As Lily crashed into him, her small arms wrapping around his neck, he felt tears streaming down his face. He stood, lifting her up, and reached out for Sarah. The 3 of them stood there, embracing, crying, laughing. A family reunited. "Let's go home," Sarah whispered, her voice full of promise and new beginnings. As they walked towards the car, Lily chattering excitedly about all the things they would do together, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The algorithm was gone, replaced by something far more powerful: the love of a father, the dedication of a husband, the commitment of a man determined to live every day with purpose and gratitude. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and hope. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Chen was truly, completely free. "Daddy, look, park. Can we go there sometime? Oh, and ice cream. Can we have ice cream?" Marcus chuckled, his heart swelling with each of Lily's questions. "Of course, sweetheart. We can do all of that and more." As they pulled up to a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, Marcus raised an eyebrow. "This is?" Sarah nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Home. I sold the penthouse. We needed a fresh start. Somewhere without memories." Marcus felt a pang of guilt, quickly overshadowed by gratitude for Sarah's foresight. As they stepped out of the car, the neighborhood bustled with life, children playing, neighbors chatting, the aroma of various cuisines wafting from nearby restaurants. "Welcome home, Daddy," Lily exclaimed, tugging on his hand. "Come see my room. I have a big girl bed now." As they entered the house, Marcus was struck by the warmth and lived-in feel of the place. Photos of Sarah and Lily adorned the walls, alongside colorful artwork clearly created by tiny hands. It was everything their old penthouse wasn't: cozy, inviting, a true home. Lily dragged him upstairs to her room, a whirlwind of pink and purple with books scattered everywhere. "Look, Daddy, this is where Mommy reads to me every night. But now you can do it too." Marcus knelt down, overcome with emotion. "Yes, little prince. Every night." Later, after Lily had finally succumbed to sleep, her excitement having kept her up well past her bedtime, Marcus and Sarah sat on the couch, a tentative silence between them. "Sarah," Marcus began, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you for waiting, for believing in me, for giving us this chance." Sarah reached out, taking his hand. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "There were days I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But every time Lily asked about you, every time she fell asleep clutching that book, I knew we had to try." Marcus nodded, squeezing her hand. "I want you to know I meant every word I said in there. You and Lily are my world now. But I also know that I have a lot to prove, a lot to make up for." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We have time, Marcus. We have all the time in the world now." Just then, Marcus's phone, a new one, given to him upon release, buzzed. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing. "What is it?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. Marcus hesitated, then showed her the screen. It was an email from his former company's board of directors, requesting a meeting. "They want me back," he said quietly. "They're offering to reinstate me as CEO, pending some conditions and oversight." Sarah's breath caught. This was the moment she had both hoped for and dreaded, the true test of Marcus's transformation. Marcus stared at the phone for a long moment, then slowly set it down on the coffee table. He turned to Sarah, his eyes clear and determined. 3 years ago, I would have jumped at this chance, he said. But now I see what really matters. He stood up, offering his hand to Sarah. Come with me. Curious, she followed him upstairs to Lily's room. They stood in the doorway, watching their daughter sleep peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. This, Marcus whispered, wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist. This is my empire now. This is what I want to build, to nurture, to grow. Not stock portfolios or market shares, but memories, love, a family. Sarah leaned into him, tears flowing freely now. Are you sure? It's a big opportunity. Marcus turned to her, cupping her face gently. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Tomorrow, I'm going to start looking for a job where I can use my skills to help people, not just make money. Maybe financial literacy for low-income families, or consulting for small businesses. And every evening, I'll be home for dinner, for bath time, for bedtime stories. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. I spent 3 years dreaming of this moment, Sarah, of being here with you and Lily. I'm not going to waste a single second of it. As they stood there, bathed in the soft glow of Lily's night light, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The algorithm was truly gone, replaced by something far more valuable, the algorithm of love, family, and second chances. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, no doubt. The outside world, with all its temptations and complications, was waiting. But for now, in this moment, Marcus Chun was exactly where he needed to be, home, with the two people who had become his entire world. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of promise. And for the first time in his life, Marcus was ready to face it not as a CEO or a tycoon, but as a husband, a father, and a man committed to making every moment count. Daddy, can we make star-shaped pancakes next time? Lily asked, her eyes wide with excitement. Marcus chuckled, sliding a perfectly round pancake onto her plate. Anything for you, little prince. We'll get one of those fancy molds. Okay? Sarah entered the kitchen, adjusting her blazer. Something smells delicious, she said, kissing Marcus on the cheek before ruffling Lily's hair. As they sat down to eat, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at the simple joy of this moment. It was so far removed from his old life of power breakfasts and boardroom meetings, yet infinitely more fulfilling. Big day today? Sarah asked, noticing the slight tension in Marcus's shoulders. He nodded, taking a deep breath. Yeah, the community center board is reviewing my proposal for the financial literacy program. If they approve it, we can start classes next month. Lily looked up from her pancakes, syrup smeared across her cheek. Are you going to teach people about money, Daddy? Marcus smiled, reaching out to wipe her face with a napkin. That's right, sweetheart. I'm going to help people understand how to use money wisely, so they can take care of their families. Sarah reached across the table, squeezing his hand. They're going to love it, Marcus. You've worked so hard on this. As they finished breakfast and prepared to head out for the day, Marcus felt a familiar twinge of anxiety. The old him, the algorithm, would have approached this meeting with cold calculation and unwavering confidence. But now, with so much more at stake, he found himself truly nervous for the first time in years. At the door, Lily threw her arms around his legs. Good luck, Daddy. You're gonna do great. Marcus knelt down, hugging her tightly. Thank you, my little prince. Have a wonderful day at school. Okay? As Sarah scooped up Lily to take her to preschool, she turned to Marcus. Remember, no matter what happens today, we're proud of you. This is the man we always knew you could be. With a final wave, they were gone, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He picked up his worn briefcase, a far cry from the sleek leather attaché he once carried, and headed out into the bustling Brooklyn morning. The community center was a modest building, its walls adorned with colorful murals and posters advertising various programs. As Marcus waited outside the boardroom, he overheard snippets of conversation. Ex-convict. Financial genius. Can we trust him? The word stung, but Marcus steeled himself. He had known this wouldn't be easy, that his past would always be a part of him. but he was determined to show that it no longer defined him. "Mr. Chun?" A middle-aged woman with kind eyes appeared at the door. "We're ready for you." As Marcus entered the room, he felt the weight of every gaze upon him. The board members, a diverse group of community leaders and local business owners, watched him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Taking a deep breath, Marcus began his presentation. As he spoke about the importance of financial literacy, about giving people the tools to build better futures for themselves and their families, he felt a passion he had never known in his old boardrooms. This wasn't about profit margins or market dominance. This was about changing lives. Halfway through his presentation, a stern-looking man interrupted. "Mr. Chun, your credentials are impressive. I'll give you that. But given your history, how can we be sure you won't take advantage of the very people you claim to want to help?" The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Marcus felt a momentary flash of anger, quickly replaced by understanding. He set down his notes and looked directly at the man. "Sir, you're right to be cautious. I did terrible things in my past. Things I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's precisely because of my past that I'm uniquely qualified to help. I've seen firsthand the damage that financial ignorance and greed can cause. I've lost everything that truly mattered chasing the wrong goals." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, worn photo of Sarah and Lily. "This is why I'm here. Not for money or power, but because I want to build a world where families like mine have the knowledge and tools to thrive. Where people understand that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the love we share." As Marcus continued, he saw a shift in the room. The skepticism in their eyes began to soften, replaced by something that looked a lot like hope. When he finished, there was a moment of silence before the kind-eyed woman who had called him in spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Chun. We'll need to discuss this further, but I think I speak for many of us when I say that your passion and sincerity are evident." As Marcus left the community center, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How did it go?" He smiled, typing back, "It went well, I think. But even if it didn't, I know I'm on the right path now." Walking home through the busy streets, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. The outcome of the meeting was important, yes, but it wasn't everything. What mattered most was waiting for him at home: a little girl's laughter, a wife's loving embrace, and the knowledge that every day was a new opportunity to be the man his family deserved. The algorithm was gone, replaced by something far more powerful: a father's love, a husband's devotion, and a man's unwavering commitment to making a difference, one life at a time. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Marcus was packing up after a particularly engaging class on credit management, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Chan?" The voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. Marcus looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. "Harrison? What are you doing here?" Harrison, his former right-hand man, stepped into the room, looking decidedly out of place in his expensive suit. I've been following your work here. It's impressive what you've built." Marcus felt a mix of emotions: nostalgia, wariness, curiosity. "Thank you. But somehow I doubt you came all the way to Brooklyn just to compliment my teaching skills." Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "You're right. I'm here because, well, the company is in trouble, Marcus. We need you back." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Marcus felt his heart rate quicken, old instincts kicking in. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that could bring down everything you built." Harrison's voice was urgent. "The board is divided, the market is volatile, and our competitors are circling like sharks. We need the algorithm." Marcus leaned against his desk, his mind racing. For a brief moment, he could see it all: the boardroom battles, the thrill of outsmarting rivals, the intoxicating rush of power. But then, unbidden, another image came to mind. Lily's face, bright with excitement as she showed him her latest crayon masterpiece. Sarah's loving smile as they shared a quiet moment after Lily's bedtime. "I'm sorry, Harrison," Marcus said, his voice firm, "but the algorithm doesn't exist anymore. I can't go back to that life." Harrison's face fell, Marcus, please, think about what you're turning down. The money, the influence, you could do so much good with those resources. Marcus smiled sadly. I am doing good, Harrison. Real good. Not just tax-deductible donations or PR-friendly initiatives. I'm changing lives, one family at a time. He walked to the window, looking out at the bustling street below. Do you see that playground across the street? Last month, it was an empty lot. But the people in my classes, they pooled their newfound financial knowledge, budgeted, saved, and worked together to build that for their kids. That's real impact, Harrison. That's a legacy worth building. Harrison was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I envy you, Marcus. You found something I'm not sure I ever had, peace. Marcus turned back to his old friend. It's not too late, you know. There's always another path, if you're brave enough to take it. As Harrison left, visibly shaken by their encounter, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced his old life, the temptation of his former power, and chosen the path he knew was right. Checking his watch, Marcus realized he was running late. He quickly gathered his things and rushed out, excitement building as he navigated the busy streets. He arrived at the small theater just as the lights were dimming. Sarah waved from their seats, and Marcus slid in beside her, slightly out of breath. Did I miss anything? He whispered. Sarah squeezed his hand. Just the welcome speech. They're about to start. The curtain rose, revealing a group of children in colorful costumes. And there, front and center, was Lily, dressed as a twinkling star, her face beaming with joy as she spotted her parents in the audience. As Lily began to sing her solo, her small voice clear and sweet, Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. This moment, this simple, perfect moment, was worth more than all the wealth and power he had ever possessed. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, and Marcus wrapped his arm around her. Together, they watched their daughter shine, literally and figuratively, on stage. In that darkened theater, surrounded by proud parents and beaming children, Marcus Chin knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. The algorithm was gone, replaced by a father's pride, a husband's love, and a man's unwavering commitment to building a legacy of compassion and genuine human connection. As Lily's song came to an end and the audience burst into applause, Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment that no business deal had ever provided. This was his new algorithm, one based on love, family, and the joy of making a real difference in the world, one life at a time. The morning of the conference, Marcus stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. It was a far cry from the bespoke suits he once wore, but it was neat, professional, and most importantly, chosen with Sarah's loving input. "You look great," Sarah said, coming up behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. "Are you nervous?" Marcus took a deep breath. "A little. It's not the speaking part that worries me. It's being back there, so close to my old life." Sarah turned him to face her, her eyes serious. "Marcus, listen to me. You're not that man anymore. You've built something beautiful here, something real. Don't let the ghosts of your past shake your confidence." He nodded, drawing strength from her words. "You're right. I just wish you could be there." "I'll be there in spirit," Sarah smiled. "Besides, someone has to take care of our little star while you're dazzling the financial world with your new philosophy." As if on cue, Lily burst into the room, still in her pajamas. "Daddy, don't go," she cried, latching onto his leg. Marcus knelt down, gathering her in his arms. "Hey there, little prince. Remember what we talked about? Daddy has to go teach some people about money today, but I'll be back for bedtime stories. Promise?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "Pinky promise?" "Pinky promise," Marcus said solemnly, linking his little finger with hers. As he stepped out into the crisp morning air, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The subway ride into Manhattan was a surreal experience, memories flooding back with each familiar station. Emerging onto the bustling streets of the financial district, Marcus was immediately struck by how foreign it all felt now. The towering skyscrapers, once symbols of his success, now seemed cold and impersonal compared to the warm brick buildings of his Brooklyn neighborhood. As he approached the conference center, a voice called out, "Marcus? Marcus Chun." He turned to see Claire, Sarah's sister, hurrying towards him. "Claire? What are you doing here?" Claire, looking flustered, grabbed his arm. "Marcus, thank God I caught you." "Sarah and Lily, there's been an accident." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What happened? Are they okay?" "They're at the hospital. Sarah's car was hit on the way to drop Lily at preschool." "I don't know all the details, but it sounded serious. I came to find you as soon as I heard." Marcus felt his heart pounding in his ears. Without a second thought for the conference or his speaking engagement, he hailed a taxi, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The ride to the hospital was a blur of anxiety and silent prayers. As they rushed through the emergency room doors, Marcus was hit with a sense of déjà vu. The last time he'd been in a hospital was the night Lily was born. "I'm looking for Sarah Chun and Lily Chun," he said to the nurse at the desk, his voice shaking. "They were in a car accident." The nurse typed something into her computer, her face unreadable. "Are you family?" "I'm her husband. Lily's father," Marcus said, fighting to keep his composure. She nodded, her expression softening slightly. "They're still being assessed. If you could take a seat in the waiting area. A doctor will be with you shortly." Marcus sank into an uncomfortable plastic chair, his head in his hands. Claire sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "They'll be okay," she said softly. "Sarah's strong and Lily. That little girl is a fighter, just like her parents." Minutes stretched into hours. Marcus paced the waiting room, alternating between frantic worry and attempts at calm reasoning. He thought of all the moments he'd almost missed Lily's birth, her first steps, her school play, the idea that he might lose them now, just when he'd finally learned what truly mattered in life, was unbearable. Finally, a doctor emerged. "Family of Sarah and Lily Chun?" Marcus rushed forward. "Yes, that's us. How are they? Please, tell me they're okay." The doctor's face was serious, and for a heart-stopping moment, Marcus feared the worst. Then, slowly, the doctor's expression softened into a small smile. "They're going to be all right, Mr. Chun. Your wife has a concussion and some bruising, and your daughter has a broken arm. But considering the severity of the crash, they were incredibly lucky." Relief washed over Marcus like a tidal wave. "Can I see them?" The doctor nodded. "They're being moved to a room now. I'll have a nurse take you up shortly." As Marcus followed the nurse to the hospital room, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had been given another chance, not just with his freedom and his family, but with the very lives of the two people he loved most in the world. Standing in the doorway, seeing Sarah's bruised face and Lily's small arm in a cast, Marcus made a silent vow. He would never again take a single moment for granted. Every day, every hour, every second with his family was a gift, and he intended to cherish each one. As he stepped into the room, Sarah's eyes fluttered open. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with love. "I'm here," he said, taking her hand gently. "I'm here, and I'm never leaving your side again." Lily stirred in the bed next to Sarah's. "Daddy, you came back for bedtime stories." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as he gathered his family close. "That's right, little prince. I'll always come back for you." Always, in that hospital room, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the sterile smell of disinfectant, Marcus Chun found a peace he had never known in all his years as the algorithm. This was his true success, his real legacy. Not the money he'd made or the deals he'd closed, but the love he'd cultivated and the lives he'd touched. As he held his family, Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The algorithm was gone for good, replaced by something far more powerful, the unbreakable bond of a family that had weathered storms and emerged stronger, more loving, and more united than ever before. One crisp autumn morning, as Marcus sat at the kitchen table reviewing some papers for his financial literacy program, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello, Mr. Chun." A deep voice rumbled through the speaker. "This is Judge Harriet Simmons. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Marcus felt a jolt of recognition. Judge Simmons had presided over his case years ago. Not at all, Your Honor. How can I help you? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Chun, I've been following your work since your release. Your financial literacy program, in particular, has caught my attention. Marcus felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Thank you, Your Honor. It's been incredibly rewarding work. I can imagine, the judge continued, which is why I'm calling. We're launching a new initiative aimed at rehabilitating white-collar offenders, and we'd like you to be a part of it. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. I'm honored. But what exactly would this entail? We want you to work with inmates who are nearing release, teaching them the skills they'll need to reintegrate into society without falling back into old patterns. Your unique perspective and experience could be invaluable. As the judge outlined the program, Marcus felt a familiar spark of excitement. This was a chance to make a real difference, to help others avoid the mistakes he'd made. But it would also mean more time away from Sarah and Lily, just when they needed him most. Can I have some time to think about it? Marcus asked, his mind racing. Of course, Judge Simmons replied. Take a week. But Mr. Chun, I truly believe you could change lives with this program. As he hung up, Marcus heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned to see Sarah, her arm still in a sling, watching him with curious eyes. Who was that? She asked, easing herself into a chair beside him. Marcus took a deep breath and explained the judge's offer. As he spoke, he saw a range of emotions flicker across Sarah's face. Pride, concern, and something else he couldn't quite identify. What do you think? He asked when he'd finished. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the tabletop. I think it sounds like an amazing opportunity, Marcus. A chance to really make a difference. But, Marcus prompted, sensing her hesitation. Sarah's eyes met his, filled with a mix of love and worry. But I'm scared. We just went through this terrible accident, and the thought of you being away more. It terrifies me. Marcus reached out, taking her hand gently. I know. Scares me too. The idea of not being here, of missing even a moment with you and Lily. Daddy? Lily's small voice interrupted them. She stood in the doorway, her casted arm cradled against her chest, her other hand clutching her favorite stuffed star. Are you going away again? The pain in her voice was like a knife to Marcus's heart. He held out his arms, and Lily climbed into his lap, burying her face in his chest. No, little prince, he whispered, stroking her hair. I'm not going anywhere. Not if it means being away from you and Mommy. But even as he said the words, Marcus felt a twinge of doubt. Was he making the right choice? Could he really turn down a chance to help others find their way back, as he had? Sarah's hand on his shoulder brought him back to the present. Marcus, she said softly, we can't let fear make our decisions for us. What you've built with your program, the lives you've changed. Maybe this is a chance to do even more. Marcus looked at her, surprised. But you just said. I know what I said, Sarah interrupted, a small smile playing on her lips. I'm scared, but I'm also incredibly proud of the man you've become. And I think this might be the next step in your journey. Lily looked up at them both, her eyes wide. Can I come with you, Daddy? To help teach the people? Marcus chuckled, hugging her close. Oh, sweetheart, I wish you could. But this is something Daddy might have to do on his own. As the three of them sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Marcus felt a sense of clarity wash over him. This wasn't a choice between his family and his calling. It was a chance to show Lily what it meant to make a real difference in the world, to live up to the values he'd been teaching her. Maybe, he said slowly, we can find a way to make this work. Together, Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Together, she echoed, as the morning light streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating their little family. Marcus Chun felt a renewed sense of purpose. The algorithm was long gone, but in its place was something far more powerful, a man determined to use his past to shape a better future, not just for his family, but for all those who needed a second chance. The road ahead would be challenging, But with Sarah and Lily by his side, Marcus knew he could face anything. This was his new calculation, his true legacy, a life dedicated to love, redemption, and the unwavering belief in the power of second. This was the culmination of months of hard work, the grand opening of the Second Chance Financial Empowerment Center. Marcus had poured his heart and soul into this project, working tirelessly to create a place where those who had made mistakes could learn to rebuild their lives, just as he had. As he looked out over the sea of expectant faces, Marcus caught sight of Sarah and Lily in the front row. Sarah gave him an encouraging nod, while Lily beamed up at him, her arm now free of its cast and waving a small, handmade sign that read, "Go Daddy." Taking a deep breath, Marcus began his speech. 5 years ago, I stood in a courtroom, facing the consequences of my actions. I had lost everything that truly mattered: my family, my integrity, my sense of purpose. I was the algorithm, a man who saw the world only in terms of profit and loss. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. But in losing everything, I found something far more valuable. I discovered the true meaning of wealth, not in dollars and cents, but in the love of family, in the power of redemption, and in the joy of helping others. As he spoke, Marcus saw heads nodding, eyes glistening with tears. He realized that his story was their story too, a tale of falling from grace and fighting to regain not just success, but true meaning in life. This center, he continued, gesturing to the building around them, is not just about teaching financial skills. It's about rebuilding lives, restoring dignity, and proving that our past mistakes do not define our future. Suddenly, a commotion at the back of the room caught everyone's attention. The doors burst open, and a group of people in suits strode in, led by a face Marcus knew all too well: Harrison, his former right-hand man. Marcus faltered for a moment, his old instincts kicking in, preparing for a confrontation. But as Harrison approached the stage, Marcus saw something unexpected in his eyes, not anger or resentment, but a glimmer of hope. "Marcus," Harrison called out, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "I hope we're not too late." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus glanced at Sarah, who looked equally perplexed. "Harrison," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What's going on?" Harrison reached the foot of the stage, looking up at Marcus with a mix of emotions playing across his face. "We've been watching you, Marcus, seeing what you've built here, and I think we were wrong about everything." Marcus felt his heart racing. "What do you mean?" Harrison took a deep breath. "The company, it's been struggling, not just financially but ethically. We've lost our way. And seeing what you've accomplished here, how you've turned your life around, it made us realize that there's a better way to do business." The room was dead silent now, everyone hanging on every word. "We want to help," Harrison continued. "The board has agreed to make a substantial donation to your center. But more than that, we want to learn from you. We want to change the way we operate, to make a real difference in people's lives." Marcus stood stunned, unable to find words. This was more than he could have ever imagined, his two worlds colliding in a way he never thought possible. Sarah stood up, moving to the stage to stand beside Marcus. She took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Marcus," she whispered, "this is it. This is the moment where everything comes full circle, where the algorithm truly becomes something new." Looking out at the crowd, at the hopeful faces of those seeking a second chance, at Harrison and his former colleagues ready to learn a new way, at Lily watching with wide-eyed wonder, Marcus felt a surge of emotion. He stepped back to the microphone, his voice filled with newfound purpose. "Thank you, Harrison, and thank you all for being here. What we're witnessing today is more than just the opening of a center. It's the birth of a new way of thinking about success, about redemption, about the power of second chances." As applause filled the room, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The algorithm was gone, replaced by something far more powerful, a vision of a world where business and compassion could coexist, where past mistakes could pave the way for future triumphs, and where every person had the opportunity to rewrite their story. With Sarah by his side and Lily beaming up at him, Marcus Chun knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but filled with purpose, love, and the unshakable belief in the power of transformation. As the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow through the windows, Marcus realized that he had finally found his true calling. Not as a corporate tycoon, not as a convicted felon, but as a bridge between worlds, a living testament to the fact that it's never too late to change, to grow, and to make a real difference in the world. On a warm summer evening, 10 years after the center's grand opening, Marcus stood in the backyard of their Brooklyn brownstone, surrounded by friends, family, and many whose lives he had touched over the years. It was Lily's high school graduation party, a celebration of not just her achievements, but of how far they had all come. As he watched Lily, now a poised young woman of 18, laughing with her friends, Marcus felt a tug on his sleeve. He turned to find Sarah, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and mischief. "Come with me," she whispered, leading him away from the crowd and into the quiet of their home. "Sarah, what's going on?" Marcus asked, curiosity piqued by her secretive demeanor. She guided him to his study, a room that had evolved over the years from a place of solitary work to a warm, inviting space filled with family photos and mementos of their journey together. On his desk lay a thick manila envelope. "Open it," Sarah urged, barely containing her excitement. Marcus carefully unsealed the envelope, pulling out a stack of official-looking documents. As he read the first page, his eyes widened in disbelief. Are these, he stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "It's the final paperwork. Your record has been expunged. You're officially free." The weight of those words hit Marcus like a tidal wave. He sank into his chair, overwhelmed by emotion. All these years, he had worked tirelessly to make amends, to prove himself worthy of the second chance he'd been given. And now, in the eyes of the law, his slate was finally clean. "I don't understand," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "How is this possible?" Sarah perched on the edge of the desk, taking his hand in hers. "Remember that senator who visited the center last year? The one whose brother went through our program? Well, he's been working behind the scenes advocating for you. Your case has become a symbol of true rehabilitation, Marcus. You've changed so many lives, including your own." Marcus stood, pulling Sarah into a tight embrace. They stayed like that for a long moment, the sounds of the party outside a distant backdrop to this intimate revelation. "We should tell Lily," Marcus said finally, wiping away tears. Sarah nodded, leading him back to the yard. They found Lily near the makeshift stage they had set up for speeches, deep in conversation with Harrison, who had become a close family friend and mentor to Lily over the years. "Lily, sweetheart," Marcus called out. "We have some news." As Lily approached, her face curious, Marcus felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. This beautiful, intelligent young woman was the embodiment of everything he had fought for, everything he had become. "What is it, Dad?" Lily asked, her eyes darting between her parents' emotional faces. Marcus took a deep breath, suddenly unsure how to convey the magnitude of this moment. "Lily, the government has expunged my record. Legally, it's as if it never happened." Lily's eyes widened, a mix of joy and something deeper, understanding, dawning in them. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. As they embraced, Marcus caught sight of the gathered crowd. Friends, family, former inmates who had turned their lives around, all watching this moment unfold. He realized that this news wasn't just about him. It was a testament to the power of redemption, a living proof of the change they had all been working towards. Stepping back, Marcus cleared his throat, addressing the crowd. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment." As the partygoers quieted, Marcus felt a familiar flutter of nerves, reminiscent of that first speech he gave at the center's opening. But this time, it was accompanied by an overwhelming sense of gratitude. 10 years ago, I stood before many of you, a man seeking redemption, trying to prove that people can change. Today, I stand here not just as a free man in the eyes of the law, but as living proof that second chances are real, that redemption is possible. He paused, his eyes scanning the faces before him, each one a part of this incredible journey. But this moment isn't just about me. It's about every person here who has fought to overcome their past, who has chosen to believe in the possibility of change. It's about the power of community, of forgiveness, of love. His gaze settled on Lily, standing tall and proud beside Sarah. And it's about the future, the generations to come who will build on what we've started here. As applause erupted, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The algorithm was long gone, replaced by something far more powerful, a legacy of compassion, of resilience, of unwavering belief in the human capacity for change. In that moment, surrounded by the people he loved and the lives he had touched, Marcus Chin knew that his journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. But whatever lay ahead, he would face it with an open heart, a clear conscience, and the unshakable knowledge that true wealth lies not in financial success, but in the lives we touch and the love we